This podcast is for informational purposes only and does not constitute financial advice. Consult with a qualified professional before making any investment decisions.
Welcome to The Wire, Agent Edition, the week in real estate presented in digestible bites. Hold on while our AI hosts take us on another ride through this week's top real estate headlines.
Welcome back to The Wire, everyone. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thanks for tuning in.
Today, we're diving straight into something that, well, could really shape how you're seeing the market evolve. We're talking about the potential impact of changing tariff policies on our local housing scenes.
Exactly. You know, you, our listeners, the real estate agents right there on the ground, you're going to feel the effects of these shifts.
Right.
And being ahead of the curve on this stuff is just key for guiding your clients.
So we've been digging into some material from the National Association of Realtors.
Yeah, specifically a recent Realtor magazine article, I think it was April 18th, 2025, called How Tariff Policies Could Impact Your Market.
That's the one. And we're pulling in some broader context from the NAR website, too.
Our goal today is really just to unpack this, look at the key trends, the potential challenges.
And hopefully equip everyone listening with insights to navigate these shifts, effectively for their clients.
Exactly. Let's get into it.
Okay, so let's jump right in. What struck me immediately reading through this is that this isn't like a blanket situation, is it?
No, not at all.
The impact of tariffs, it won't be felt the same way across all states. It's much more nuanced.
Absolutely. The Realtor magazine piece really drives this home, and it leans heavily on the research of NAR senior economist Nadia Evangelou.
Okay.
Her work highlights that, well, the economic makeup of each state is crucial, particularly its balance of exports versus imports, relative to its GDP.
That balance is key. So let's get specific then. Where are we seeing the biggest differences in this reliance on international trade? Can you give us a snapshot?
Sure. So according to Evangelou's analysis, Louisiana is a major player on the export side.
Okay.
About 27% of its GDP is tied to international sales, mostly energy and chemical sectors driving that.
Right. That makes sense for Louisiana.
And then Texas is also significant, around 17% of its GDP from exports, primary stuff like oil, gas, chemicals, but also increasingly tech products.
Okay, so those states are sending a lot out. What about the states that are bringing a lot in? Imports.
Right. Well, Kentucky actually leads the way there in terms of imports as a percentage of its GDP. It's roughly 32%.
32%?
Yeah. And then you've got Michigan and Indiana following that. Import percentages around 35% for Michigan and 20% for Indiana.
And that's critical for their manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
Cars and industry.
Exactly. Those imports are vital for their manufacturing base, especially automotive, like you said, and other industrial outlet.
Now, what's really interesting here, and maybe a bit surprising, some states are really involved in both exporting and importing quite heavily.
That's a great point. You mentioned Kentucky leading imports.
Yeah.
Well, it also ranks third for exports as a percentage of GDP.
Huh. Both ends.
Yeah. Evangelou emphasizes that its location, its logistics infrastructure. It's positioned Kentucky as this vital hub for moving goods across borders.
Well, it's not just coastal states.
Not at all. And Texas, too. It ranks second in exports, but it's also ninth in imports. So this dual reliance.
It means they could feel shifts in global supply chains more acutely. Or maybe in more complex ways.
Potentially, yeah. More complexly. Could be more susceptible to shifts, both good and bad.
So for you agents working in places like Kentucky or Texas, this is, well, it's crucial to keep in mind.
Definitely.
If your local economy has these significant ties to international trade, you really need to think about how tariff policies could ripple through. Things like warehouse demand.
Factory job number.
Yeah, and even how sensitive your market might be to price changes or, goods just not being available.
Precisely. Understanding that international trade profile of your local economy, it's becoming a really important piece of understanding your housing market.
Okay, so that's the state-by-state difference. Now, the Realtor magazine article also raises a bit of a red flag for new construction.
The cost side.
Yeah.
Exactly, potential rising costs. Let's dig into this a bit more. What kind of price hikes are we potentially looking at here?
Well, the article cites the March 2025 National Association of Home Builders, that's NAHB, and Wells Fargo Housing Market Index.
Okay.
Their estimate was that recent tariff actions could add around $9,200 to the price of an average new home.
Wow, $9,000. That's substantial. What's driving that kind of jump?
It really boils down to tariffs on essential building materials, the stuff you need to build a house.
Like lumber, steel.
Exactly. Lumber, steel, aluminum, copper, even things like home appliances and gypsum, for drywall.
Right.
The NAHB estimates that about 7% of all goods used in new residential construction last year were imported.
7%. So these tariffs hit those imported goods and builders' costs go up.
Directly. It translates straight to higher costs for builders.
Okay. So if you're working with buyers looking at new construction, this is definitely something you need to be ready to talk about.
Absolutely. Potential price swings, the reasons behind them, it could become a much bigger part of that conversation.
For sure. And for agents working with builders, understanding these cost pressures is just vital for navigating deals, setting realistic expectations.
You need to be able to explain these market dynamics.
Exactly.
Okay, so the third key area the article hits on is the potential ripple effect on the labor market.
Right. And consequently, housing demand.
How do these factors connect with tariff policies?
Well, Evangelou suggests that states with stronger trade links, think Texas, Michigan, again, might see more volatility in their job markets because of these policies.
Volatility, okay.
And as she points out, really, the fundamental drivers of housing markets are people and income. It's pretty basic.
Right? If people aren't working or feel insecure, they're less likely to buy.
Exactly. So if tariff policies lead to job losses or just general economic uncertainty in a region, that's going to naturally have a knock-on effect on people's ability and maybe even their confidence to buy homes.
That makes perfect sense. If a state relies heavily on exports and those exports get hit with retaliatory tariffs, making them more expensive, that could definitely slow down those industries, potentially lead to job cuts.
Exactly right. And, on the flip side, states that aren't quite as reliant on exports might actually find themselves in a more stable spot.
Interesting. How so?
Well, Evangelou suggests they could be less susceptible to global supply chain hiccups, and they might even become more attractive for growth in other sectors like tech and services.
Oh, right. Or even retirees looking for stability.
Precisely. Which could further fuel housing demand, especially in, say, urban and suburban areas of those states.
So for us as agents, a really key takeaway here is to watch how changes in international trade are impacting local employment. Right in our specific markets.
Yes, that's a direct line.
It connects straight to housing demand and, frankly, our clients' ability to buy or sell.
Couldn't agree more. So thinking about all this, what really stood out to you as maybe a surprising element?
For me, it has to be that Kentucky example we touched on earlier.
Yeah.
When you think about states really deep in international trade, Kentucky, well, it might not be the first name that jumps out.
Probably not for most people, no.
Yet, it's leading in imports as a percentage of GDP, and it's also a major exporter. The article calls it a key player in facilitating the movement of goods across borders. It just really underlines how interconnected even, seemingly landlocked regional economies are with the global marketplace.
That's a fantastic point. It really challenges that assumption that it's only the coastal states with the big manufacturing centers that are deeply affected.
Right. It's a good reminder that even if you're not in a major port city, these national policies can still have a pretty significant and maybe unexpected local impact.
Absolutely. Modern supply chains mean these inland states can play huge roles, and that makes them just as sensitive to policy changes.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. What's the main takeaway for us as real estate agents from this whole deep dive into tariff policies? What should we really focus on?
I think the most critical takeaway is simply the need to stay informed. You have to know how these national tariff policies are specifically influencing the key industries and the trade relationships that matter to your local economy.
Right. Not just the national headlines, but the local impact.
Exactly. Take the time. Understand whether your state leans more heavily on exports or imports, or maybe both, like Kentucky.
Are there good resources for that?
Yeah, the article mentioned the Inver's Economist's Outlook blog. That's a great place for ongoing insights and analysis.
Okay, good tip. Because being able to connect these big national policy shifts to what's actually happening on the ground in your own backyard, that's going to be a real differentiator, isn't it?
Huge differentiator. It lets us have much more informed conversations with our clients.
Helps us anticipate market shifts maybe a little better.
And just serve as better, more knowledgeable advisors overall, which is the goal.
Definitely.
This raises a really important question for everyone listening. Beyond these broad trends we talked about, what are the specific industries that are the economic engines in your area? And how reliant are they on international trade?
That's the key local intelligence, right?
That's the kind of intel that's going to be incredibly valuable as these policies continue to evolve. It's not static.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear the impact of tariffs on housing isn't simple. It's not just up or down.
Not at all.
It's this complex interplay of economic factors, and it's going to play out differently depending on the unique DNA of each state's economy. We really hope this discussion has given you a solid framework for understanding these potential shifts and, how they might affect your business and your clients.
Remember, in a market like this, being that knowledgeable resource, that's your greatest asset.
Absolutely. Staying informed, understanding these underlying economic forces, that's how you provide real value.
Right.
This is certainly a story we'll keep following. In the meantime, keep exploring those resources. Keep thinking critically about how these national trends connect with your local realities.
Yeah, ask that question. What are those key industries in my state, and how connected are they globally?
That's your homework. Thanks so much for tuning in to The Wire.
Thanks, everyone.
We'll catch you next time with more insights to keep you ahead of the curve.
If you're interested in your own personalized edition of The Wire, please visit us at thewire.fm/custom. We offer market-specific podcasts with all the latest real estate news and market analysis delivered to you weekly or monthly. Own your market with a personalized edition of The Wire, the week in real estate. Thank you for listening.